Yes, 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 and welcome to the Conscious Awesome Show. Ladies and gentlemen, today's special, not just because every day is special. There's just extra juju today. I think you're going to be able to feel it through this episode, which is episode 28 for the Conscious Awesome Show, with your host, your co-host, Justin Polgar. That's me, and Danny Katz.
That's me.
That's her. And today we have a very special guest. Our first guest on the Conscious Awesome Show. We've been holding it together here. Danny and I are kind of guesting each other and hosting each other and playing with those roles. And we thought, let's just kick it off with the best of the best. Let's just go home run on this one. So today we have the esteemed pleasure of inviting and having Mikki Willis as our guest on the Conscious Awesome Show. For those of you who know Mikki, he kind of doesn't need an introduction, but because I like to do introductions, I like to do that. Mikki Willis is the founder of Elevate Films, also a father of two young aspiring men, boys on their way to being men, and as well as the director of the Plandemic series, both Plandemic and Plandemic Indoctrination. And we're going to have a fun time today exploring not only concepts that and no doubt I'm sure we'll touch in on the Plandemic series, and we're just going to talk about what it's like to be conscious and awesome in this here now. So welcome, Mikki.
Thank you so much. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it is nice. It's great. Danny, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, I mean, full disclosure, Mikki and I have been friends for a long time, and I helped Mikki on Plandemic too. So just full transparency, this is sort of a family affair.
Family affairs. We're into it.
And Danny's being incredibly humble because she did more than help. She was key researcher and my co-writer, and they couldn't have done it without you, Danny.
Thanks, Mikki.
Yes.
Fun to work with.
I was loving getting the little tidbits, like the behind the scenes. Like if there was a behind the scenes, I feel like I kind of know the story a little bit, what was happening, what was getting put in and taken out. It was very exciting. And I was just being a cheerleader. When people ask me what kind of leader I aspire to be, it's a cheerleader. I'm just here to really just
nice.
rah, and make sure that everyone's feeling permission slips to be their awesome selves. Yeah, wow. So there's a lot of places that we can jump in.
Here's my thought.
Yeah, DK.
One of the pieces that, Mikki, that brought you and I back together, because we've been circling around each other's spheres for 20 years, was this sort of pushback we were getting in our community for our perspectives. And so I'm just curious, like on a basic psycho-emotional level, how that has been for you to receive this pushback from Plandemic and from the strong stance you're taking with all the knowledge that you have.
Well, it's been both surprising and expected at the same time. Understanding the state of our world and the damage that media has done to literally indoctrinate all of the minds to follow a narrative that is anything but real. It didn't surprise me that people were choosing to side with the fearmongers, because that's how it works. You know, it's when people are so latched into their own survival, and they have, you know, these entities are the ones that are telling them how scary it is, but also we're the ones with the solution. So you have to listen to us if you want to be saved. It's understandable why that, you know, the critical thinking would kind of go out the window, and people would lose sight of even people that have known me for 25 years that would suddenly side with entities that they don't trust, which is big pharma and big media, over their friend. That was shocking to me, to see people that were blogging about me that they've known me for years saying things like, I've known him for years and I've trusted him and he's been one of the most integral people I've ever known, but something's happened, you know, instead of considering, or maybe he's on to something. Maybe we should at least have a dialogue first and find out what's going on and dig into it and do our own research before we just continue to take the word of mainstream media and big pharma to very, very corrupt, two of the most corrupt industries on the planet. So that part was, you know, it was also very shocking because, you know, I can speak about this because of the title of a show. Um, you know, I thought I was part of a conscious community. And that was kind of the most shocking, because for me, when we talk about, you know, bettering ourselves and coming into a place of awareness and consciousness, it also brings you to a place, it should bring you, if you're doing the real work, into a place of humility and openness. And it really requires us to walk the talk. You know, if we're going to say things on, and you're just a part of me, and all, you know, all these catchphrases that we use in the conscious communities, but it just goes out the window the moment the fear kicks in, and we get, they just got triggered. And I lived in a little valley. I had to move because I lived in a little conscious valley of meditators and yoga doers, and they were honestly some of the most hateful. Not everybody. Some were incredibly supportive and loving, but a lot of them were just vile, you know, threatening, and not willing to even. I reached out to a couple of people on our local forum. I said, I'll buy you lunch. Would you like to sit down and have lunch? I will show you what I have and what I've discovered. And I think it will matter to you. I think you'll understand that the reason we're being smeared so heavily is because we're onto something. And no one was willing to even have lunch and talk about it. They just wanted to stay in their fearful mindset. And I think that speaks to a larger psychological problem that's occurred, that we've become so comfortable in our discomfort that it's more frightening to leave that discomfort, even though we know that within that zone, things aren't right.
Yeah, there's a courage that is being that's knocking on the door of, I think, of all of us, because there's a responsibility in freedom, in sovereignty, and in claiming your own critical thinking and common sense. I'm liking to go back recently and try and pinpoint when that shift, that tribal shift happened, when it was, we're in this together. Because I mean, I have a lot of friends that, you know, when 9/11 happened, it was just obvious, you know, especially living here in Santa Cruz. I was in Santa Cruz back then as well. It was just obvious that there was in the us and them, that the larger entities that were, you know, the powers that were, as we like to say, and as actually, as Frank from Quite Frankly likes to say, that's where we grabbed that one, the powers that were. Great interview, by the way. That was one of my favorite interviews that I've seen in a long time.
That was really good.
Oh,
yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. I've really appreciated his line of questions. I think it was excellent.
Yeah, deep. It was great.
Yeah.
It was perfect. I'm kind of curious when you think, or when that shift started to happen, when you felt that the circles of friends and within the conscious communities started to have that divide, or when did the fear become so penetrating that it started to split and divide? You know, the divide and conquer is super obvious right now.
Well,
I wonder for you.
I mean, the point was crystal clear, you know, because when the first Plandemic came out, there was a massive amount of support from everyone that knew me. They were just sharing it left and right. It was all over the place, and people could feel it. They were resonating. They were crying. They were saying, "We need to look at this. This is so hugely important, and it's critical timing right now." And it was just 100%. And then the moment the media caught wind that this piece of media was going so viral, that they created this, you know, full scale character assassination on both myself and Dr. Mikovits. And they did such a good job at it by having it appear to be such a scientifically based debunk of everything that she said and who she is and who I am, that and this illusion of truth that occurs when people see all these publications that they've always trusted saying the same thing. They assume, oh wow, these people have more resources, more time, more ability to suss this out. Maybe I was wrong, and maybe my friend got duped by this crazy woman. I had a lot of messages like that, just saying, "Did you vet her, man? This woman's going to destroy your career. She's clearly a criminal. She's clearly a." And I said, "No, I've known her for 2 years. Do you think I'm a veteran filmmaker, media producer? Do you think I'm going to put something out like that during a moment as critical as this if I didn't fully vet it? I know what I'm doing here, and I can't vouch for every single detail of her personal story." Because we all have our own interpretation of what happened in the past, but I can tell you that the critical details are spot on and they matter, and we need to listen. And so there was a moment there that then I saw suddenly all my friends started to get shamed by other people. They had the video up, and then I started seeing other people going, "Don't you know this has been debunked?" And we all got excited on it, but we were duped, and this is irresponsible, and now blood is on your hands, and you're going to hurt people just like he's doing, just like she's doing. And so then there was this onslaught of apologies, people going, "I'm so sorry. Yesterday I posted something and I took it down because I really learned a valuable lesson. I didn't do my due diligence." Just cowering to this propaganda mentality. And that's when the split happened, right there. That's when the shame was so heavy, and people are so they're so dependent upon tribal acceptance that the feeling of not being in agreement with the collective is so, and I get it. It's so hard for people to think, okay, I have 500 friends on Facebook. Do I want to lose 400 of them? These are my people, my friends, and it's much easier to lose this one guy than all 400 of my friends or whatever it might be. And so I understand that. But it's also a shame, and it's also something that we need to rise above, because we will never make change as a collective as long as we allow the cycle manipulation through the media into our minds that then cause us to take actions against each other. That's how we're divided, and that's how we're weakened. And so we need to course correct that rapidly.
There's a prioritization of truth that it seems to be being called for.
Yeah.
Truth over preference.
In witnessing the Plandemic phenomenon and knowing, all of us know about the big plan for the technocratic takeover and all, the nefarious horrors that it is, I think for me, the hardest thing has been seeing what has happened in our community, and just on this basic human level, seeing, oh, these people who know us, like really know us and love us, and they can turn. What does this mean for all of humanity? And I'm wondering, has it affected like your larger perspective on humanity?
Yeah, great question. It has. It's shown me what I already knew to be true, but just that it's more severe than I thought it was, that the mind control is more severe than I thought it was. When you can convince hundreds of thousands of organic, loving, health conscious people that you shouldn't go outside and breathe fresh air and shouldn't have sunlight on your body, and reducing your oxygen by wearing a mask everywhere you go, even if you're not sick, is somehow the moral, the right choice. To put a mask on your 3-year-old, 2-year-old children, these things, all that knowledge that everyone has learned from meditating in nature and understanding the power of our natural immune systems, and the fact that our planet provides everything that we need, and that we've been severed from our natural ability to evolve and heal by Western medicine largely, and a lot of other industries that have gotten involved that don't want us to have our sovereign system empowered such that we don't need their medicine. And that would be the truth if we just rejected it. We just wouldn't need it. Only under very severe traumatic situations would we actually need that. And I think that is the incredible gift and value and potential of Western medicine, but we need to start relating it to it that way. It was never meant that every time we feel sad, we pop a pill. Every time we have a headache, we pop a pill. This wasn't, we weren't meant to evolve this way, and it's doing incredible damage to our systems, which is ultimately the end goal as far as I've been able to learn that the end goal is complete dependency. So financial dependency, health dependency, thought dependency, everything, right? Transportation dependency, everything is about us being so dependent that on a system that we then can be controlled, because if your money is digital and it's tied to some kind of social system and you haven't been a good citizen, well then they can cut your money off, your food, your ability to communicate with each other, tell you what to wear, and these things are happening right before us right now. And the conspiracy theorists, God bless them, have been warning us about this for years, and I'm one of the ignorant ones that didn't listen. I had people come to me because of my position in media years ago, and they warned me, and I laughed them off because I was programmed to be incredibly allergic to anything that sounded like a conspiracy theory. I didn't understand at the time how our language has been weaponized, how morality has been weaponized. And quite frankly, I wanted to live in my bubble of delusion. I wanted to just believe everything was fine. And I didn't want to believe that there are pedophile rings and people harming children and all the horrific stuff that is happening at the hands of our human organism. I didn't want to believe that. I wanted to live in my bubble, enjoy my wife and my incredible life, and just trust that everything would be fine. And now I've just reached a point, particularly after I become a father in the past 10 years, that I can't sit by and watch it happen anymore.
Yeah, there's a biological imperative that happens there. That I think becoming a father for me really did turn the volume up for me, and even before, like there's something about hearing, because I remember reading some David Icke, for example, maybe in like 2001, and thinking like, wow, this guy is far out.
Yeah.
Not like this guy's dangerous or this guy is a bad person, but more like, what an interesting, just keeping it without the judgment piece of it. What an interesting line of questioning that this guy must have gone on to find what he's found. Is it true for everyone? I don't know. Like, the internet was a different place back then for researching these things. It's fascinating to me because I know that it has informed the way that I discern and the way that I depict, without having to choose a side right off the bat, or this is right or wrong, because I understand that we live in a multiverse where right and wrong are not so black and white. There's a lot of gray area.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we like to offer our audience, and also Danny and I just love to dialogue about, is what is that mechanism of discernment, for people getting the heavy blowback from their friends. I'm definitely getting into a lot of conversations where people want to save me. Like, I need to be saved, apparently. And I'm like, I don't really feel like I'm not asking for that. I'm not soliciting that. I'm looking at my life in such deep gratitude for so many blessings. And I don't think I want to be saved from whatever you're thinking. There's some dynamic in that. I'm curious, and Danny, I want you to chime in on this as well. What is that?
Before you ask this, can I make a comment about David Icke real quick before we get too far from your mention of that, and then hold that question for a second, because I think this is very important. I think some of your listeners will want to hear this. So I too used to think David Icke was a crazy man, like so many people thought, and I would tune him out, and I think that it's because he's made some real critical errors in his public communications, and that we can all learn from. Because now I have a great deal of respect for the man. And there are some people who see things long before the rest of us see things. And I think those messengers have a responsibility. You also mentioned the word discernment. It's a very critical word for us to realize that there are, I know as a storyteller, there was so much more I could have put, as you mentioned before we started the show, you saw a lot of the things that were coming and being considered and being cut out. There were a lot of directions I could have gone into, speaking about the truth about Bill Gates Sr. and eugenics and a lot of things that are very real. But there's always, we have to remember as truth tellers, as everyone's starting to step up to become their own version of a truth teller, that there's a real discernment that's necessary. We have to remember that every word we speak is a bridge. Because if we want to speak to just our audience, and I think that's one of David's critical, for me, it's an error. For him, maybe it was absolutely intentionally what he wanted to create, because he had his own audience that he felt was ready to hear certain words. But unfortunately, the mainstream, the masses of people that I think we need to build a bridge to, we have to be very delicate in our language, such that it doesn't take much to trigger people with a word these days, and they're gone. One word, wrong word chosen, and they've tuned out, and they're gone. And that's how we've all been wired, to be so sensitive that way, to not give each other the pass to be fallible with our speech. So I do want to say that as all of us as a collective step up and start to share our truths with the world, that we have to remember that even if our little collective bubble is into talking about lizard people or whatever, it may not be, the rest of the masses may not be ready to hear that yet. So there's some discernment that we have to exercise in our ability to reach more people, if that's our goal. I assume that's almost everyone's goal. For why else would we speak out if we don't want to reach the largest audience? And so I just wanted to say that, because I too had a perception of him that was derived from some of the things he had said before I was ready to hear them. Mm-hmm. And actually now understand even some of the most bizarre stuff. I understand the lizard people comment. You know, I've had ayahuasca ceremonies where I've had encounters in other dimensions, and you understand that there's so much more to this, so many more dimensions to this world, that other people have the ability to tap into in advance before a lot of us reach that point. But we have to be careful of how we share what we see in the other worlds when we come back. And so I just wanted to mention that.
Most definitely. And actually, before we get into the discernment question, my father-in-law, who is an amazing mystic, one of the most phenomenal humans, and wise and learned and healing and musician. He just had the whole stack, and he passed last year. And one of the things that his daughter, my wife Zoe, would tell him all the time is, Dad, you can't go around blowing people's minds. Sometimes you just need to stretch their consciousness a little bit. Because nice. People thought, there were definitely people who thought he was a crazy man. You know, he was like the shaman of the village in a lot of ways, and did profound work for people who were ready to take the leap.
Yeah.
Mikki, I think this is one of your superhero skills. And as someone I've been on the Ike train for 20 years. I'm one of those old school conspiracy theorists. And back then, you know, you look at, you know, even like in Alex Jones, and I've talked about this before on other podcasts, it's like knowing all that we knew, there was just like a rage and a passion, and like we want to fix it, and we weren't really as discerning or strategic. And I think you're part of this newer wave. You know, there's you, there's Frank, there's Amazing Polly, there's Spiro, people who have the capacity and have done enough work to be able to hold this information and not freak out and just want to spew it all over everyone. And I think it's really allowing our culture to evolve in the ways that it needs to evolve at a rapid pace, because you and these other truth tellers are able to disseminate the media in ways that are digestible. And I really appreciate that about, you know, working with you and learning that from you. And I think, yeah, like David, he's speaking on a lot of different dimensional levels that not everyone can grasp. And unfortunately, all these years later, because he has not mentioned the reptilians in over a decade at least, but it's still so tied to him. So I really appreciate, I think it just speaks to your media savvy, as well as, you know, your own work on yourself, that you're able to deliver this really tough, you know, hard to swallow information in ways that people can digest and not, you know, freak out about.
Well said, and thank you for that, Danny. That you're spot on, because I do see myself drawing from some of my years in Hollywood doing commercial work, and remembering all the boardrooms that I sat in, you know, working with ad agents, executives, and learning, you know, back in the day, the heyday of infomercials and all of that. There was a very specific language, and these marketeers knew. They're like, oh, you can't say that for the Midwest. Oh, that's great for the East Coast, but you can't use that word in the Midwest. So we're going to have to find, it's like just learning that, like, wow, it's, you know, demographics you have to know how to speak into the different demographics, because you can say things in certain territories that you can't say in others. And then you chop that down to the micros and you understand all the little bubbles, all the things we can say in the yoga world, that all these funny little catchphrases that when we say them to just everyday people out in the world, they just go, I don't know what you're talking about. It's a different language. And I learned this from incredible person that we brought in when we were building Elevate Film Festival. And we were doing, they call those mind dumps, right? Where everybody goes, says, okay, tell me what the mission of this whole thing is about. And our whole team is sitting around and we're going, love and unity and that. And we're throwing these things out and he's writing on the whiteboard. And at one point he just froze and everyone kept shouting things out and he just froze. And he turned around and he said, you all live in a bubble and you have no idea. And he goes, I travel the world and no one talks like this. If you guys want to meet your top goal here, which is to not preach to the choir, you have to learn a new language, because none of this is going to reach beyond the choir. And I'll never forget that lesson. It was an incredible, valuable lesson for me as a storyteller.
Yeah, I get that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
What a great token. That's to be able to step outside of our, to wear someone else's shoes and their language, to be able to just enter into totally different context. That's part of being a social shaman, which is very important in being a storyteller. Yeah, indeed. Thank you for modeling that, Mikki. And
Thank you.
As well, there's a lot of opportunities within one-on-one conversations that we have with people who do have shared language. And there, even in that, there's a nuanced way of guiding someone in. Even one of my favorite ways of making an analogy of the mind-blowing versus mind-expanding subtlety, that discernment, is when you talk about something like Burning Man. And for people who have been to Black Rock City, and for them to say, before I went there was just no way I could have understood that world. There's no way. I remember the first time I heard about Burning Man, it was like, oh, people go in the desert and just like play music and dance around, and there's like costumes. And I was like, that sounds interesting. I didn't really feel like that excited to go. But after I went, I couldn't stop talking about it. And I had to really refine the way I was talking about it, just so I wasn't the crazy person.
Yeah.
For all, so I had to learn how to measure people's, how full were their cups already, how empty with potential. That's actually the first time I met you, Mikki, was at Black Rock City. I don't expect that you remember this, but I was riding in my bike and had like this full heart coherence, multi-dimensional vision of just being so blown away. And I see this group of people, maybe like a dozen people. It's you and Nadia and like a group of people. And you guys were just decked out in some kind of, I don't know, deity, Greek god. I was like, what are those? Are those people? I mean, I could just see this glow in this group.
That's how I feel every time I see Mikki and Nadia. I'm like, are those people who look like this?
Yeah, there was something so just like right out of some imaginal space, but I knew I was seeing it in front of my eyes. And I know I have a picture, because I was like, I need you guys, everyone stop, we're taking a group picture. I gotta find it. It's in some
Find it, please, because we lost all of our photos in the fire a couple of years ago. So please, that'd be great to see that.
Oh, it's a great. I know that they would be a great blast from the past. It was like in 2004. It's one of those early Burning Man memories of just being like, I don't even know how I would explain this to someone. Like so many of us.
I remember being at that Burning Man and seeing you, Mikki, and Nadia a few times. I was with Oli back then. But I'm curious, before we get too far away, because Justin, you just kind of took us into it a little bit. And I'm curious if you, Mikki, because obviously like you're speaking to the world on this very large scale through the Plandemic series and all the content you put out. But have you found ways in one-on-one or in speaking with smaller groups where people who are think they're so closed off and think they're so right in their indoctrination inculcation, have you found ways or strategies to slip in truth that get people to open up in ways that they
Yeah.
might not otherwise?
Yeah, another good question. And I'll say that, you know, so a month and a half ago, we moved to Texas. And I'm starting to realize we had an incredible dinner last night with about 8 really amazing people overlooking downtown Austin. It was just epic in all ways. And I realized sitting at this dinner that the people are different here. Even the people who came from California that are here now, there's something different about it's got its own problems, its own political policies, and its stuff it's not perfect. But I, in speaking like I said a moment ago, per demographic, it seems that there's almost like these consciousness bubbles, and everyone exists within this collective agreement of the different frequencies depending on their locality. And so if you were to ask me that about Los Angeles, I would say it's much more difficult. And I don't know why. I don't know exactly why. Is it because these places are, can you say they're more liberal, and so they've been more indoctrinated and more heavily influenced by, the mind control? I really, I don't know. But what I'm recognizing here is there were a couple of people at the table last night who had different opinions, but they listened. And if I said something that made sense, they acknowledged it. Said, good point. Oh, I've never thought of that. That's interesting. Wow. And that rarely happens where I used to live. It's just a lot of like, it's almost like they get angry when you make a point, a good point. When logic happens, it's almost like, well, just, screw you. You're dangerous. What? No, I'm trying to take you out of the danger, And so um, I found myself having success when talking to people. Um, you have to kind of gauge where they are. You have to listen enough to get where they are. And you have to know, like, what is their level of fear? First of all, what is their level of fear? Because if I'm speaking through a filter of fear, it's a very delicate dance because it doesn't take much to trigger them. And so you can't just jump in with, radically different ideologies than their media has been, pushing at them. And so there's definitely a little bit of a give and take of really making sure I listen to them. And then I like to, because I've been studying climate change for a long time. And there's so much BS in the climate change narrative. When people wake up to that, they're going to be really angry because, but this is how I approach it when I talk to environmentalists so that they understand, don't confuse me with some far right climate denying, anti-environment. Don't put me in that category. That's not possible for me to be there. I've been an environmentalist for many, many years. But I will, when I explain to them that these lies are actually preventing us from solving these issues and loving our planet and fixing any climate issues that may exist, I say, but we need to reframe it and really, like, I call it pollution. Air pollution, noise pollution, water pollution, food pollution, soil pollution, all of these things. And the moment we start looking at it as pollution, the mind immediately goes to all the technologies that exist that can solve it tomorrow. And that's what they don't want. So the people that are getting rich off of the climate movement or gaining such great political leverage as a result of the climate doom and gloom, they don't want it solved. That's why most of these things never get solved. That's why massive AIDS foundations for years and years and years, when there's cures that exist, but they never find them somehow. Cancer, breast cancer, all these things that, hundreds of millions of dollars get pumped through these organizations and NGOs, and they always do a little bit of good, but they never quite live up to what they should be doing for having as much money as that they've taken from donations and from the taxpayers. And so that's the big game, that fake philanthropy that's happening out there. But I find that if I speak to people from a place of understanding that I'm concerned that the environment is not being taken care of because of these lies, then they can see that, oh, I'm not someone who's just saying oh, I don't believe any of that crap and we don't need to do anything for the environment. No, I deeply care. And I'm really concerned after a couple of decades in environmental work that we have been pushed away from seeing the solutions that we could implement tomorrow and make a massive difference. And that's what the lies are causing. And when I say that to environmentalists, they go, tell me more, like what lies and what, and then I can start talking, let's start talking statistics and analytics now. And isn't it interesting? Let me show you how these regulations really work. Because a lot of people are upset with Trump because he's rolled back a lot of environmental regulations. And I've gone down the rabbit hole on each one of them. They're fake. They're like a mafia tactic. They put up a gate, stop a pipeline, and the pipeline then has to pay these people. And then they open the gate and the oil flows. Nothing gets done for the environment. And so good on Trump for shutting those down, because it's just all it's doing is making these bureaucrats and politicians more wealthy. But until you understand the game and how corrupt all of these systems are, we don't understand how to move forward to actually do good, in our environment. So when I have conversations from really wanting to make progress so that I'm relating to the person, their passion is helping the environment. And I'm saying, I'm with you fiercely. And that's why I want to talk to you about the lies that are being told, because it's stopping us frontline activists from actually achieving. And I asked one the other day, I said, out of all the environmentalism that you've done years of it. Is there anything that you feel it was a victory, you won, and it was successful, whatever you set out to do? And she's like, there were a lot of little victories that happened along the way that I remember. I said, but the thing you set out to achieve, do you remember one going, we won that? I remember a lot of them feeling like we won, but quite honestly, years later, I look back and I'm like, well, I think we were placated. We were given a little bit of candy to go away. But honestly, no. I said, there's the problem. We're being distracted by all this stuff, these invisible boogeymen. Go over there and keep fighting that invisible enemy while the real damage is being done behind us. And so that's what we're really trying to get to, is making some real effing progress on this planet.
And we can. We have such amazing technologies, and I also I like that you mentioned that about speaking to it as pollution instead of climate, because it makes it a lot more real, and I think something that people can touch and feel. And I think ultimately it really comes back to personal responsibility. There's this when I'm sitting and looking at the climate change conversation, it's all outsourcing who's going to do the change. We need this centralized change to happen in order for our lives to get clean. And to me, there's something fundamentally flawed in that. If we're outsourcing our responsibility, then how can we even really be here and really even enjoy the victories when, if, we're going to have to make them happen ourselves.
Yeah. Good point.
Mikki, you mentioned the T word. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious because
we can say Trump on the show.
We can say Trump. I've seen a lot of pushback on both Plandemic 1 and Plandemic 2, where they'll bring in Trump. And when I see it, I think, are we talking about the same film? Because I didn't.
I know.
I worked on it and I didn't see him mentioned, and this isn't.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what do you think that is?
Well, okay, so it's our weaponized language, and I always say to people, I showed two presidents in Plandemic, and I threw them both under the bus, Trump and Reagan, and that's not a lack of endorsement for either. I actually have a great deal of respect for the good things both of those men have done. But the truth of the matter is Trump came out and said he was going to mobilize the military to issue vaccines to everybody.
Yes.
And he said it, and so I showed it. And the truth is, Ronald Reagan signed the Childhood Injury Act, which took all liability away from vaccine makers. Now, he later said he really hated doing that. He didn't want to do it, but he did it. And so when people, wrap this into like this is a pro-Trump movie, I'm like, where do you get that from? Because we're fighting for freedom. And so freedom has been weaponized. The word freedom, the word, anything patriotic has been weaponized. The word USA, American flags, all of these things, anytime you have pride for your country, it has been conflated with far rightism. And that's just incredibly bizarre that people wouldn't see that for what it is and go, but it's the same tactic they use. It's why they say, 1.5 million people marched in Germany to end the lockdowns, to fight for their freedoms, to fight for their, and I have footage of that event. And it was a bunch of families, and most of them were smiling and having fun, incredibly peaceful. And the ones that were interviewed were just talking about saving their family business, saving their local shops, and wanting to have the responsible choice to make the choices on their own, whether they have to lock down and let their livelihoods go or not. And most of them said they're hanging on. If this goes 2 weeks longer, we're done. Our family business, 5 generations, is done. And then you see what the New York Times says about it, and it was a white supremacy event. And you go, well, that's pure propaganda. So what they do is they plant that, because what they don't want is the US to rise up that way. And so when all of those uprisings are, it's weaponized morality, when they can go, these people are selfish, they don't care, they're going to kill your grandmother or your mother, they're Nazis, they don't, when people start to get tired of the lockdown or the lack of civil liberties here, we go, well, but we don't want to look like a Nazi. We don't want to go on the street and, and be labeled as that.
You want to be a
And so,
racist.
be a racist, and it's like, so all of these things get conflated. So the people who, I've had people flat out attack me saying, you need to go out and denounce Trump right now because people think that and I'm saying, there's no way in the hell I'm going to do that, because I've not endorsed anyone in politics. And so lately, my last one was Bernie Sanders. But I said, there's no reason to, because if you actually really watch the movie and you step out of your own mind conditioning, you'll see that I only mentioned Trump once in the movie, and I threw him under the bus, because I think what he said in that moment, I actually think it's probably reverse psychology, him going, I'm going to mobilize the military and get vaccines out to everyone, because then he knew that people would go, not me. And that's what happened. That's what happened. A lot of people said, it's too early. You cannot make a vaccine that fast. I don't trust Trump. And it's like, yeah, that's what we've been trying to tell you. You can't make a vaccine that fast. So now that Trump said he supports them, half the world is saying they'll never take it now. And so was that his chess move of reverse psychology? I don't know. But it sure did have a good impact ultimately. But the truth is, he said it. I put it in the film. And there's nothing pro-Trump in there. There's nothing. It's just us calling out what has now been proven. I mean, I'm surprised I haven't received more thank you letters. I've received a few, but week by week, every point that we made in Plandemic has been proven true through major studies, peer-reviewed studies, through massive groups of typically foreign doctors that have the ability to still speak truth in the world. German doctors, doctors from Spain, all over the place, are stepping out to do these tests to say, basically it's validated every point in the movie. And yet people don't see that and go, hey, oh my goodness, you were actually right. There is a thing with masks that can, a German study just did a whole mask with kids in school wearing their face mask, and took a bunch of samples from it and showed that the kids were, because of the moisture of circulated breath, they were breathing mold all day. It was developing mold inside their mask. This is why real surgeons change their mask several times a day, but we're not doing that in the public. So one of the main things that people got mad at is when Judy Mikovits suggested that the mask can make you more sick. And now it's been proven. That's exactly what happens, especially with a populace that doesn't know how to wear them, interact with them, or which kind to wear. And so all this, the main points the media used to say we were dangerous and irresponsible and all of that, those points have been their points have been debunked. Yet there's no, and we've gone toe to toe with the major fact checkers on online threads, all of them that were willing to go toe to toe with us, and not one single point. They all walked away from the conversations. They tried, they got cocky, and they'd say, I think you're missing this. And it was mostly David Martin from Plandemic 2 that was going at him. And this guy knows his shit.
You don't want to mess with David.
You don't want to mess with David Martin. And so they would come at us with something, and I would read it and I'd go, oh, this doesn't look good. Uh-oh. David may have missed this, because I'm reading it. I'm like, this does not look good. And then it gets put forth and they're like cocky, like, okay, how about this, Mr. Martin? And he's like, I think you missed the addendum that took place in 1993. Here it is, boom, you know, and it's like, and they're just like, oops, we'll take a look at this, we'll get back to you, and they're gone. They leave, you know, and not one point. If there was one point that I would have learned from either Plandemics that were like, we missed the mark, Judy said something wrong, and David says something wrong, I said something wrong, I would go out and make a public apology really quick, because I think that's very valuable for my credibility. I would love to go out and say, I was wrong. I want to show journalists and people how to do that. We get it wrong, take responsibility. But I've not been able to find one claim that is worthy of that kind of apology. And that's amazing, considering how much the film was smeared, that they've not been able to, you know, validate one thing. The only thing Judy Mikovits went back on is, when I did her follow-up interview, for those who didn't see the follow-up interview, is she said, I said nothing on the RNA schedule works, but rabies, which I think was freshly introduced as an RNA scheduled vaccine, she said, I would take a rabies shot. I do think it's an after the event treatment that its side effects don't outweigh the benefits, and that was it. You know, that's the only thing that she wanted to correct. Other than that, everything's been validated, and yet you know, you would think the world would come back and say, thank you for getting this right and informing us way ahead of the curve, because now much of what you said in that film has been validated, and we should have listened to you. But no, instead it's just, you know, forget about that, move away.
Do you think that will still happen?
I'm not going to hold my breath for that. I think it's going to happen on the individual level, and I think that people are too prideful, quite honestly, in this age. Being wrong is one of the worst things you can be on social media, and nobody wants to be wrong. And so I think it's going to happen privately. I think people will have their own awakenings, and probably to themselves in their own quiet, private moment go, wow, I overreacted. I should have done more homework before I jumped on them and attacked those people. And I don't need an apology. I don't need that in my life. I just want people to be freed by the truth. And so if that happens in their own private space, awesome. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's something that sometimes we don't get the satisfaction of knowing, but there's a trust. There's a trust in knowing that the truth prevails. And I know that I lean into that, and that's part of the motivation for speaking truth and being willing to get into conversations where I might get wrong. But you know what? I don't remember when it was not okay as a human being to be wrong sometimes. I think that's a really valuable, some of my greatest growth moments have come from that vulnerability of saying, oh yeah, shit, I am wrong about that. And then what comes from that is me actually getting to be more of who I am, and who I'm here to be.
It's really critical that we acknowledge when we're right and when we're wrong, and when others are right and wrong. And right now we're really good at acknowledging when others are wrong online. But we're not good at being humble enough to go, we brought up Trump, and I stopped looking at Trump a long time ago. And so now when people say, who are you voting for? I said, I'll never vote for a who again. I'm voting for a what. I'm looking at the policies on paper, because I have, you know, like everyone else, I can get sucked into a very charismatic. Obama sucked me in. I cried when he was inaugurated, you know, and then 4 years later, I'm like, new wars and innocent people being droned and guns being given to the drug cartel. Like what did I vote for? What happened?
Yeah.
You know, exactly. And you know, but then every time he would speak, I would melt again. And I had the same reaction with Bill Gates, right? It's like, I know what the man's done. I've been researching it for 10 years. I'm crystal clear. I've talked with people who were directly affected by his clinical trials in third world countries. And yet sometimes when he speaks, especially when he's next to Melinda, I just get sucked in. I just go, I just want to believe him. I just want to, like, I want this narrative to be true. It's such a sweet narrative that one of the richest men in the world is helping us. You know, I want to believe in that fairy tale, but it's just not true. So it's so important that we, you know, I got clobbered on Facebook one time because when Trump signed the prison reform, that's a huge move that Obama promised he was going to do all 8 years and never did it. But that's the most racist law that we've ever passed, you know, written by Joe Biden and established by Bill Clinton, which disproportionately jailed mostly black, but some brown men. for nonviolent crimes. Thousands and thousands of men were put away for life, and some women. And
And the ripples of
horribly,
that, the ripples of that in family and
exactly,
destruction.
breaks up the families. I mean, it's horrific what that policy did. And Obama promised on his campaign trail that he would end it, and 8 years later he never did, and Trump did. So I put out a message of like I don't care if you love him or hate him or whatever. Let's get beyond that. Can we celebrate this move? And people were just like, no, we can't, because if we celebrate the move, we will be giving Trump a win. And there's something very dangerous in that, because our own moral compass then gets skewed. And especially for the younger people that are watching that going, oh, prison reform isn't worth celebrating. They don't understand, aren't really celebrating. They don't know it's just because they don't want to give Trump a win. They don't understand that like they don't know what to vote for, because they don't, if that policy isn't something we're celebrating, I don't know what to vote for. It does a great deal of damage, and it lowers our standards. And so we have to just be honest. If Joe Biden does something great, wonderful. Let's celebrate it. If these politicians can keep competing, and I wish the Democratic Party would step up, and instead of just making their entire platform about stopping Trump, I would love to see Trump, who is, because of his egomania of wanting to win and be a winner, if they start competing on who could do the best for this planet, imagine the things that would get done. He'd step up and let me do something better. And they step up, let me do something better. And we just did this, and we just ended poverty, and we just like let's make that the competition.
Yes.
And then we'll vote for whoever wins that show.
It's like a pure capitalism model.
Yeah. Instead of just running on, let's stop the evil, which is not working.
And which only fuels the evil, because all we're talking about is the evil instead of talking
That's all we
about
focus on.
Our solutions and how wonderful we can make it.
Yeah, and if a fly landed on Pence's head, it's like, are we that effing petty right now that is what's going to dominate the news cycle, that a fly landed on someone's head? I mean, like we have to stay out of the minutia of the lure of that low level dialogue. We have to rise up as a people and take personal responsibility to say to everyone who posts that shit, like, stop. So what? What was said? What was real? Where were the lies? We need to dig into this and focus there. But just like mask and all this stuff, we just focus on these petty things that add no value to our life and to the process of our evolution whatsoever. And that we need to mature past that.
On what you're just speaking to, we're in the middle of a 3-part podcast, our own series, the Conscious Awesome series. And the first one was freedom over security. The second topic is
principle over party.
Principle over party, which I think this covers nicely. And the third is truth over personality. And those 3 tenets just are so deep right now. And if we could
say
just
them
get
one more
honest,
time for me. So one more time.
Freedom over security.
Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm. Principle over party.
Yep.
And truth over personality.
Fantastic.
It just seems like the most honest way to go about, at least through the lens of watching politics and being able to discern politics, and as well just seeing the nuances that the Constitution gifted us to be able to actually see and utilize these tools. I mean, if we're told constantly that our tools are crap, then why would we invest time and energy into learning to use those tools? I think there's something really valuable. And as we speak about investing in children, and that's something I know that we're getting down to the end of the hour here. I want to ask you a little bit more. I wish I
had
more
time. I'm on an airplane to the Red Pill event in Georgia,
which is exciting. And your message is with you everywhere that you're going, and I'm glad that we're getting to share this with our audience. And we'd love to have you back, for extended conversations, because these are the conversations that are needed. The reason why I do say we have time also is because it is about the children. It is about 7 generations, the children's children in the world that we're creating. And I wanted to just ask you, as far as best case scenarios for where we are right now, we're winning. We're going to win. Obviously, truth is winning. What do you see, and what do you hope for your children, for my children, for the next generations? What do you envision when you get really super crystal clear about where we're going?
There are massive things happening right now. We're involved in several different initiatives. One is we're looking seriously at purchasing 500 to 1,000 acres of land. And we just went on a safari looking at an incredible piece of property, two different properties on Sunday. And a bunch of families, excuse me, I'm sorry, my phone just shut off for a moment. There we go. A bunch of families are coming together to create the environment for their children. It's all families. And so I see a lot of that happening. I'm also in the process right now of partnering with a very, very well-respected journalist who has been one of my heroes for a number of years. We just verbally agreed to a partnership yesterday, and with my producing partners and another great team of technological geniuses, we're going to build a new platform that's going to be a bulletproof portal that the world can go to for truth in every fashion you can imagine. So there'll be, fact checking the fact checkers, politics, medicine, and we'll hand curate, select, and invite all the top truth tellers of the world, so they have a platform that can never be taken down. And it's being done in a new energy that's zero hoarding, zero. We want everyone to promote their own platforms, their own channels. So we want to help build their audiences. So it's completely in a non-competitive energy. So I see a lot of this happening. My kids now go to a school that was started because of Plandemic. A group of parents got together to say, we will not have our kids re-enter school wearing face masks, teachers and shields, in some cases freaking dog collars, plastic, cones, and being, and having this idea that humans are dangerous and diseased and infected, embedded into our children's minds at a young age, and created a generation of hypochondriacs and human resistant, people. We don't want to create that. And so a bunch of families got together and we started our own school. And so I see that happening. I see the unintended consequence of this draconian lockdown and this incredible communist flavored overreach of power, forcing people to become sovereign, to understand that if the game is dependency, which it is, total dependency, then I'm going in the opposite direction. I'm going to depend on myself and my planet, and I'm going to take care of my family first. And I'm seeing families get really serious. I mean, like people building, compounds, healthy, beautiful, luxurious compounds, but every single parent is armed, and there's armed guards at the gate, because they're when you start to mess with the, and threaten the idea that protective services can come into your home and take your child away because you were tracked through your cell phone standing too close to somebody who has COVID. When you start to propose those kind of ideas to the American public, you're asking for a firefight, and people they're not going to go quietly, and they will lose. They will lose. What we're willing to do for our children is unimaginable. And none of these parents that I'm dealing with, they're fierce, and they won't be stopped, and they won't be bullied, and they'll comply to what makes logical sense. They're not selfish. They will do what's safe for their neighbor, and they will adhere to measures to protect each other. But we're not any longer going to adhere to illogical, um, politically driven ideologies and policies any longer that then strip us of our right to just be free, to just walk outside when we choose to. This is part of the story that the conspiracy theorists told me as far back as 12 years ago, that was coming, because they had read the manifestos that I've only read within the last few years. They read them, these things came out in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and they read them long before, and they said, this is, matter of fact, the person that's hosting this Red Pill Expo that I'm going to speak at, Another very weaponized word, red pill. You know, he's been doing this for 5 years before the term red pill was suddenly conflated with QAnon, and now it's become like like saying Nazi. But you know, red pill simply meaning to wake up to reality. And the man, G. Edward Griffin, has a video that's become viral again this year, a black and white video that he recorded, filmed, I should say, because it was 1968. A hour-long talk or so, speaking to a group. It looked like a library or something like that, where he was reading chapters from different communist manifestos. And when you see this video, look it up, people, if you haven't seen it yet, G. Edward Griffin, and watch his whole talk. It's not only beautifully eloquent, but it's terrifying, because he's literally saying what we plan to do. 1968, he's reading this. What we plan to do is to eventually use the power of race to have all the white people feeling so guilty that they think they're supporting the black people. And we're going to have these fictitious groups set up. And what we'll actually be using black people as what they call cannon fodder to create a race war. And we will burn down the cities and the forests. And this is how we're going to gain total power and bring the US to its knees in 90 days. And these are in the manifestos. So there were people that read them and were aware of them long before me and had the courage to speak out about them 10, 12 years ago. And they came to me to tell me, as a media maker and as somebody with integrity, we think you should know about this. And arrogantly, and I would say fearfully, I shrugged them off or even laughed them off, because I thought it sounded too bizarre and too crazy to even be possible. And now, you know, we're living in it. And so,
welcome to the middle of the manual.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. We're right in the middle of it right now. And please go watch that video, because it'll blow your mind, some of the details of what they said they're going to do and now what's happening. And they do it all in the guise of morality, right? Who doesn't want to support, who doesn't want to, you know, decrease racism and sexism and all these things? We all do. And there's no country that's done it more than the US. And this whole narrative that things are getting worse and getting bad, they are right now because of politics. But the truth of the matter is, when the politics gets out of it, things get better rapidly. And if you look at the actual analytics of violent crime, murder, rape, homicide, all of it, even environmental numbers, CO2, all of it, everything has plummeted for the better. It has all gotten better. We are in the safest time, maybe not right now because we're on the verge of civil war, but before all of this crap, we were in the safest time that America has ever experienced. And while other nations still throw gay people off of buildings, you know, all that barbaric mentality has been either totally or drastically minimized or eliminated. And we should celebrate the progress that we've made. We should celebrate the fact that we've evolved, that we now see people of color as equals to us and not slaves, and recognizing that at some point we were all victims of slavery, and now we're all victims of slavery again, equally together. Right now, we're all part of this system that is asking us to participate, you know, as slaves, basically. And but we need to really get clear with the good things that have happened in this nation, because in the same way, I've been in the world of transformation, of whatever, call it self-help or the work that it takes to bring people back into balance and into health and to good relationship and love and all of that. And at the core of that work is helping people get past a story that they adapted to. And it's usually something that happened that they were not properly parented, or they were so bullied in school that they actually bought into the lie that they were stupid or ugly or whatever it might be. Almost everybody has at one point carried one of those self-judgment stories within themselves. And then they grow up and they create their life through the filter of that story. And if you think that about yourself, you don't attract the greatest mates. You don't attract the greatest abundance. You don't attract the greatest of life. You don't shine because you think you're less. That same thing we need to understand happens on the collective level. If we think our nation is horrible, And it's still, we still need to keep mentioning every single day that it's founded on rape and genocide. And if we keep telling us how horrible our nation is, it will never heal. We'll only create a future through the filter of the past, and we will never move forward. And that is by design. Those people who know that that's how it works. So we need to overcome that as a people and start telling a new story, a story that moves us forward, a story that's closer to reality, which is humans are good. We're born good. Some go bad. We can help them not do that if we're aware of what causes that, greed and all of the other things that push us in bad directions. The abuse of our powers, the abuse of sex, the abuse of food, all of these things are not bad on their own. It's our tendency to be abusive. And when we can take personal responsibility and stop behaving that way, everything comes back into balance, and then we can celebrate the progress that we've made and make greater progress moving forward.
Yes, building that bridge.
Amen.
That's what we're doing. That's a beautiful outro.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mikki.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you both. I really appreciate you, and both of you. Thank you. I know it took so long to get this interview together, and I really appreciate your grace through this. And Danny, again, I really couldn't have done what has happened with Plandemic if it weren't for your support. And you know how much I leaned on you, and you were always there for me, and you took it to the next level. And I appreciate you. I appreciate the who you both are together. I think you make an incredible team of hosts here. So it's an honor to be here.
Thanks, Mikki.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us on this open-ended journey. I still feel like we're at the very beginning of something very beautiful and amazing. And I continue to vision and speak and share that and remind people that there are really beautiful things, and just coming back to gratitude. So I'm grateful for both of you. I'm grateful for the Conscious Awesome show completing its 28th episode. You guys will be able to find this and all of our episodes at consciousawesome.com. Mikki, do you have? We'll put links in the show for the talk you were just speaking of. You said G. Edward. What was it? Griffin.
It's the Red Pill Expo. It's happening this weekend. Yeah.
The Red Pill Expo, Plandemicseries.com, and as well, what was the name of that of the talk from the 60s that you were recommending?
It's called Something Worse Than War. But just search for G. Edward Griffin, communist talk. But it's something greater than war.
I'll find it.
Threat, like a threat greater than war, or something like that. I forget what it's called.
Yeah, if it can be found, Danny will find it.
She'll find it, believe me. And watch it. It'll blow your mind, and all your listeners should check it out.
Cool. We'll
Awesome.
put the link. Thank you so much for all your great work, Mikki. Have fun in Georgia, kicking ass and expanding minds and hearts, and give our love to Nadia and the boys.
We will do. We'll do.
Yeah.
And love to you both.
Soon.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Mwah.
Take care.